Hey there, TFN here. Wanted to share with you a little bit about something that's been on my mind, and especially a topic that people have been approaching me about all day, every day for the last, I don't know, 6 weeks. When I was in China, it was all everyone could speak about, and since I've been back, it's been a big worry and question mark for many of our customers. That's the trade war with China, and specifically the second round of tariffs that are coming. So here's the deal. Will it escalate? Will it end? Will it die? How will it change? Will China accept? Will they not? Will they push back? The answer is I don't know. I don't think anyone knows at this point. If they had an answer, we'd either have more tariffs already or we'd have an agreement and less tariffs. But what we do know is that this trade war does have an effect on us, on everyone. And I want to cover some things that are just happening in the industry and share with you what big companies and companies like mine are doing to try to get around the tariffs or find alternate sources to help you. I'll also share what it actually means for consumers, for you as a consumer. What's going to change? Why is this important? Why is everyone talking about it? So let me get my screen shared here, and I want to show you a little bit about this trade war. So the trade war, what's it all about? U.S. prepares for tariffs on additional 300 billion of imported Chinese goods. Wall Street Journal, trade fight escalates as China hits U.S. with higher tariffs. U.S.-China trade war raises risk of a real war. And then right here, is China about to give America a bloody nose? Yeah, pretty doomsday talk here. But let's face it, it's a real worry. People don't know. And they know that global costs are going up, and that if we have to pay more taxes, that means our costs are going up. It's hurting the Chinese economy. There's questions as to whether it's helping us any right now. I think the long-term goal and hope is that it will, but there are short-term consequences to that. And what are they? Well, let's talk about the actual taxes. What is happening to this 25% penalty that everyone's addressing? So if you look at the screen, I hope you can see my mouse, but there's a few things going on. So the left and the right is a $10 item and a $15 item, both being taxed. What happens on the left, we're assuming for everything that the applicable tax rate is 4.5%. That means that, let's take this $10 item right here. Before the trade war, let's say we purchased the widget, we'll call them hats. Let's say we purchased a hat for $10 and we ship it to America. For this purpose, for the exercise, we won't calculate any shipping costs, no logistics fees, purely the cost of duties, what we actually give to the federal government for manufacturing overseas. So we purchased a hat for $10. When it crosses into the United States and gets cleared by the CBP, we'd have to pay a tax of 4.5% or 45 cents. The total cost, I have COGS, cost of goods sold, minus shipping, is $10.45. If we look at the $10 item since the trade war, what we have right here is a trade penalty. Assuming the hat comes from China, we would pay the $10 to our manufacturer. We would pay the 45 cents to the federal government for saying, hey, we made this in China, we're bringing it to the country. Here's your taxes, 45 cents. And then on top of that, we would pay the additional 25% or $2.50 fee, making the cost of the good $12.95. That's right. Instead of $10.45, the exact same hat from China now costs $12.95. Assuming, and if we go down to the bottom part, assuming shipping was $1 a hat, our total cost for the one before the trade war is $11.45. After or during the trade war, when the hat is being taxed or penalized, that hat now becomes almost a $14 item. If we assume a 3 times markup, meaning we're going to charge to our customer 3 times more than the cost of the product, because as the brand, I also need to cover warehousing fees, employees, marketing, etc., packaging, shipping, all of that. So I need to have more than just twice the value of the good. But the hat that was $11.45, I would sell at $31.35, and the hat that was $13.95 would go for $8.85, $7.50 more. Let's do another one at $15, just to get the math, because I really want people to understand, like, each hat goes up $7.50. That's the effect of the trade war, or more, right? A $15 item would pay a tax of 68 cents, making it $15.68. Since the trade war, it would pay 15 plus 68 cents plus $3.75, or almost $19.50. If we go to the bottom, assuming it still costs us $1 to ship this really super nice hat and still have a 3 times markup, the item goes from $47.03 to $58.28. So essentially, if the companies pass on the cost to the customer and mark it up with their same margin that they've traditionally done of 3x or 5x or whatever that is, the customer ends up paying 24% more for the good. That's a real thing. So imagine going to Target, Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, doesn't really matter, anywhere where a good comes from China, and all of a sudden everything became 25% more expensive. That's the real cost of trade war. And for those that buy product in China, that's a real risk, because if you're a smart buyer, you don't just focus on the cheapest purchase price, you focus on the total cost, which is this COGS minus shipping number, right? You want to find out, how can I get it as cheap as possible? And generally speaking, taxes plays a role in that. And if we can't get around that out of China, then we have to go someplace else. So where are other goods coming from? Well, as far as imports into the USA in millions of dollars in 2017, China was by far the most. I think there were like 493 billion or something like that. It was a very large number. Then you had the EU, Mexico, Canada, Japan, Germany, yada, 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 yada. Okay. So all these other people are trying to sell the US goods, but by far the largest is China. Okay. As a buyer right now, you need to be asking yourself, if I can't buy from China, where can I go? So many of these economies have established relationships with the US. I think the EU, the large majority is cars. Mexico, the large majority is cars and home appliances, things like that. Products are usually assembled just south of the border and then brought into the country. Not to mention Mexico also just got hit with a tax. But yeah, all these different places are trying to make it. So where do you want to go? Where do you want to go to try to make your product for the same amount of money or less, in the same quality, in the same lead times, with the same lead times, and not have to pay the 25% tax? So if I pull up a map, this is a map of the world. It's very pretty. I got it from mapchart.net. Allows you to highlight these things. Kind of cool. But here's what's happening. So everything that's gray is essentially, in my opinion, going to have little to no change from the trade war in terms of they will export more to the US. Red is China. That is who the trade war is with. Right now, they are the only country affected by the 25% increase in taxes to the US. So anything coming from China, right here in red, is going to be taxed additional 25% on July 1st if Donald Trump increases the tax rate or has an import penalty. The yellow are areas of conflict: Venezuela, Iran, North Korea, Myanmar has some trade restrictions, Cuba, Venezuela. Places that probably aren't best for your business right now if you're in the USA, and that you should probably stay away from. There are also, it is actually possible to import from some of these countries right now, but there are high taxes, sometimes over 100% to bring the goods in. Finally, the green is the areas that are the most opportunistic. So if I was, well, I am, as a buyer and as a sourcing expert in global sourcing, I'm looking at the world. I'm saying, where can I go to make X amount of widgets for the best total value? And what we are seeing is most companies are looking in these areas in green. So you have Mexico, Brazil, Dominican, Nicaragua. In Europe, you have much of the Slavic countries, as well as Turkey, that's over here, Ukraine. You have a lot of textiles coming out of Egypt, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Madagascar, Lesotho. There's interesting opportunities in Congo and Nigeria. I thought about putting Kenya in there, but not too much. But the majority of it's all going to be around here in this area, in Southeast Asia. So Pakistan over to Indonesia. Includes the Philippines, Malaysia. Then you have Thailand and Vietnam. Those are the major economies that people are looking to move to. But there's a lot of questions as to, can they make it? Can they make it when I need it, at the price I want it? And do they have access to all the materials? So China, the reason I say access to materials is it's important to understand that, first of all, China is a huge country, has lots of resources, lots of people. Most of the manufacturing happens along the coast here. So Hong Kong's there. Most people talk about, Shenzhen, which is right next to Hong Kong, Guangzhou, and then you hear about, Yiwu, Hangzhou, Shanghai, and then all along this coast here. That's where most of the manufacturing takes place. Chinese manufacturers love to say, we have a completed supply chain. What they mean by that is, not too far from them, or is very accessible, they have access to all the materials they could want and need. That means that if I'm a garment manufacturer in, let's say, Xiamen, which is right over here, I can find near me a mill that makes a type of fabric I need. Or if it's not near me, I can ship it from someplace else in the country for relatively cheap. It's very common to go in China and to go in these production yards or different factory yards where it's a business park, they call it, and there's different factories in it. And it's very common for them to say, hey, I'll use your machine shop, you refer your plastic customers to me, and they work together. It's part of the Chinese Guanxi. So this whole part of China, all of it is tooled in microeconomies that are actually very large, but to help the manufacturers be successful. A great example of that is in the city called Weihai. Most people have never heard of it, but it's an interesting case study because Weihai is where most of the fishing poles in the world are made. There's a gentleman who worked for a Japanese fishing pole manufacturer. He was Chinese from Weihai. He eventually left that factory, went to Weihai, and opened up his own factory. It's a very, very large operation. It's enormous. When you're driving through the city, the factory, has several buildings, and it's almost the entire length of the city. It's really, really interesting. But what's happened in Weihai is, because of that factory, around it has appeared many different vendors that compete with this main company, meaning engineers, salespeople have broken off and started their own fishing pole factory, as well as sub-suppliers of components for those factories, as well as products that you can also buy in the same space. So if you go to Weihai, you could buy your fishing poles, your fishing reels, which is what you use to bring in the line. You can buy the fishing line. You can buy the fishing waders, nets. The list goes on. It's all in that little city because the one manufacturer came. Then the supply chain just grew naturally and organically to accommodate the buyers so they could do their business faster, better, cheaper, right? And China has helped with that. This is true all over the place. So if you look at Shenzhen, it's tech. If you look at the city of Foshan, that's right here next to Macau on the other side of the bay, it's primarily home electronics. If you go into, Zhejiang, into this part, it's stocks between Haining and Chuji. In any case, the whole country is like that. And that's not to say you can't find a good sock manufacturer in Guangzhou or Shenzhen. It's just to say that there's certain regions that have naturally grown into being the manufacturing superpowers in China. And they've got this whole economy and supply chain that's just organically grown. So when we go back to our world map and we say, well, where would we make it? You have to look and say what makes the most sense and where will the economies grow naturally. However, China right now is hurting with the trade war. There are actually problems happening. I think that the news doesn't do a great job reporting what's happening. They give you an idea or a perspective, a glimpse, especially as it relates to how it hurts the U.S. But remember, there's two sides to this war, and I really don't like that word. I think it's more a releveling of trade terms between the two economies. But facts are Chinese manufacturers are hurting. They are. It's happening. They know it. There is a slowdown. They don't have the orders they want. A lot of factories are being downsized or are closing completely. It's happening. I was in China 3 weeks ago. It was 3 weeks ago, meeting with a factory owner, and they told me they had $25 to $30 million in revenue that was on hold in orders from large retail distributors and brands in case the tariffs increase. And it was to the point where they said, if the tariffs increase, we will not order because there will not be profit for us. So they were there waiting, paying hundreds of employees, waiting to know if they were making the product or not. The effect for that is actually even more significant because think about it. If they're getting a $10 million order and they're trying to make 10%, that means it's $1 million profit. Sounds pretty good, right? Sounds awesome. Who wouldn't want another $1 million? But they need to buy material from their material suppliers. So they might have to spend $5 million on materials. Then they might have to spend $2 or $3 million on labor. Then they might have another $1 million in overhead and staffing and all that to make their $1 million. Well, if they don't get the order, they don't pay any of those people. The material suppliers don't get a cut. The printers don't get a cut. The packaging company doesn't get a cut. The employees don't get paid. It's a trickle effect and it hurts. We've also found that the factories that are less dependent on U.S. revenue, meaning have less revenue from the United States, are actually, they're doing well. They're doing fine. The economy is pretty strong. So if they're selling to Europe, Latin America, the Pacific, the Middle East, they're usually doing okay right now. However, that's going to change as more competitive options open up overseas. If factories continue to close and lose business, we could see millions of Chinese laborers lose their employment. Why that's significant is China, most of their workforce is migrant in the sense that they don't actually live in the cities. They're provided housing by the factories. They come from the countryside. They travel there to work. They go home once or twice a year. They work, do that, then go home. However, if there's no job waiting for them, it's uncertain that these otherwise low-skilled laborers, per se, I don't want to have that sound derogatory in any way, but these people that are used to doing these factory jobs will have to stay in these small remote villages and either work the land or do whatever they have to provide. It's a real thing and it's a real danger. And finally, the consequences are real and the effects will be increasingly difficult to bear as taxes and costs continue to increase. So companies have already been leaving China. It's already been, happening for the last few years as costs have increased in China, standards of living has increased. Low-cost items like apparel have had to go to where labor is cheaper. Vietnam, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India have all been very good options. But now all products are starting to leave China. Everything. And the taxes are accelerating the rate at which they leave. So again, where are they going to go? And the real challenge many buyers have is because China has that, completed supply chain, there is no one-stop shop anywhere. It's very, very difficult for one company to be able to move all of their production in any one economy and have everything they need, which means that, traveling to China, you can buy a ticket to China and just stay within China and do all your business, but it would be potentially very difficult to buy your clothes, your electronics, and your metal parts all in Laos or Thailand or Taiwan, right? You might end up having to buy your electronics in Thailand, your clothing in Pakistan, and then your exercise clothing in the Philippines, right? And that's what product's going through right now. We are currently in the process of retooling our supply lines, and we're taking the most significant products, ones that are most vulnerable to the changes in taxes, and then identifying ways to help those customers cut costs. So if you're in a similar situation, here's some questions you need to be asking yourself. Question number one is, what is the actual total dollars being spent on taxes and costs that can be passed on to the consumer? Well, that sentence isn't spelled right. I'll correct that in the PowerPoint and send it out to those that want it. But what is the actual total dollars being spent on taxes, and can that cost be passed on to the consumer? That makes more sense when you read it that way. Is the 25% so significant that it's worth retooling everything and leaving the relationships you have from someone that knows your product, knows how it's made, that you trust, to find someone else? Other questions to ask. Some products are extremely proprietary, use proprietary technologies of Chinese manufacturers. So can anyone make this product, or am I stuck? Do you have to stay where you are? Let's say you find a manufacturer in another country or economy that's not taxed with 25%. Do they have the ability to make it and scale to take on your orders as well as the ones of their other customers? What is the cost of switching? Sending personnel there, training, inspecting, finding materials. All of that has a real dollar cost. How long will it take to do that? And can I do that before the holiday season when my sales are greatest, or my next season, or when I need my next order, or whatever that may be? Will you lose your competitive advantage if you pay this tax? So if your ability to hold your market share is dependent on the prices you currently have, I highly recommend A, finding better pricing, and B, finding a better value proposition. I'm happy to discuss that with you if you need it. Do I think the trade war will escalate, or will some tariffs go away? I spoke to some people that were very optimistic. They're saying, hey, they'll work it out once it becomes significant, once they work through the details and iron everything out, it will just go away. Things will go back to normal. I would lean on the side of caution, and I would suggest that you hope for the best, and I think everyone would love for these taxes to go away, but while you're hoping for the best, you should also plan for the worst and just anticipate that maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump is stubborn and Xi Jinping is also stubborn, and they don't want to make a deal or are unable to agree to terms that work for both of them, which to me seems silly, because both sides should be able to figure out a deal that works. But, maybe you feel differently than I do. Another thing to think about, can I cut costs elsewhere to offset the 25% until we find a sustainable solution? Maybe that means pushing your supplier, using that alternate material that you don't love, but it works. Whatever that means, reducing of features. We've seen people on bags that are putting less pockets in bags in order to keep the costs a little bit lower. So if they're able to take off a little bit on the bag, if they take off $1, not only do they save the $1, but they also save the 25 cents in taxes, right? And so that might offset on a $5 bag, meaning a bag that was $6 and now it's $5, adding back to 25%, they're still in the right zone. So sometimes you just have to be very creative. Can I switch on my own, or do we need help? Exploring new economies, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Taiwan, wherever you're going to, it's not like working in China. It's different. Relationships are different. Business practices are different. Supplier-buyer relationships, contracts, terms, port fees, export requirements, all of that is different. Do you know how to do it on your own, or do you need help? Is it different? I'd say 99% of the people watching this are probably going to say, I don't know what I need to do to start, or how to find a supplier in another country. And then finally, and this is where I suggest everyone start, be transparent about the problem, let your supplier know. That is, can my existing supplier provide a solution that allows us to continue working together? If you approach your supplier and you say, look, I don't want to go to somewhere else. I don't want to work with anyone else. I want to keep working with you. However, this is what needs to happen. They may have creative solutions to help you. They may have been working on something for several years. We have one manufacturer that said, oh, hey, we're actually working on opening up a third factory in Cambodia, so we'll just move your production to Cambodia, right? It could be that simple. It usually isn't, but it's worth asking about. One thing I highly recommend is vetting all solutions. It's not worth doing anything gray or illegal to try to save a little bit of money on taxes. Do it by the book. Make sure whatever you're doing is clean, safe. Audit any new facilities. Let me turn this video off so I can keep sharing. So that's the status of the trade war. It's dangerous. People are losing manufacturing contracts in China. They are struggling. They are hungry for business, which is driving down price a little bit. However, costs are going up and these taxes are going to be brutal. If I want to hear from you, if you have questions, write them below. Send me a message. I'd love to get the conversation. If you have ideas about where to move production, or if you want to brainstorm or consulting, reach out to myself or the product team. We'd be happy to help you look into alternative solutions. There are options out there. The sooner you get on it and the sooner you try and pivot and move or get creative with how things are made, produced, packaged, etc., the easier it will be to roll out that plan if the tariffs do hit on July 1st. I'm with you praying they don't. I really don't want them to. But, our leaders are working it out and we have to support them. If you have any questions, reach out to me or the product team. Thanks for watching.